You made a new chess-based training course. That's how we call it nowadays. There's no more Fritz trainers. It's over. And it perfectly aligns with a Fritz trainer you have done not that long ago about the greatest chess games of all time.
Classic games, yes.
So how is the connection to these games, which we're looking at now, and to the greatest classical games?
Well, when we are talking generally about classical games in chess, we are talking about times of Capablanca, Alaska, and even before that. And I made my first video course about those games, about classical games. But of course, after that, there are a lot of very important games which developed chess theory and chess in general. And last time I stopped about the times when Botvinnik started to play, and now I want to go a bit further and to make them, which I call the modern classics, and it's about times from Botvinnik, Euler, and I think the last game which I recorded is 1998 or something like this. So in all these times I tried to find important games which helped to develop the chess in general, and also some very nice games which are just very nice to see. And so this is the idea.
A feast for nostalgic fans and a pleasure for people who have their favorite chess players in these times and areas. Now the question, of course, and I think you get this a lot, is like, well, look, we're in the time of where we have an engine now, and games have changed. The modern games in the 2020s, even in the last 4 years, are very, very different to those classics. So why should we even give our time and effort to look at those classic games?
That's a good question, but I can remind you that, for instance, Carlsen, the strongest player of our time.
Heard of him, yeah.
He said with many occasions that he believes that it's important to study classical games. And why so? Because actually now everything is based on quick decisions, on knowing the theory, on computer analysis, but you still need to develop a feeling where the pieces do belong on the chessboard. And I am convinced, after so many experiences as a trainer, that there is no better way of getting this feeling than rightly analyzing or having explained classical games.
That makes sense.
This develops a very good feeling of where do the pieces belong, and also it teaches you a lot of things about typical plans. You don't have to remember many things, you just have to understand how to treat particular positions. And this is why classical games are very important. Sometimes you don't have, you know that in such a position, let's say Kasparov or Fischer or somebody just made this move. You don't check it necessarily with the engine. Maybe the engine will show maybe 2-3 moves which are not worse. But you are sure that this move was made by a great player and it worked well against another great player. So it is a good move. So you get this feeling. And this is quite important to understand this, not always to check everything with the engine. We are talking about positional chess, not about tactical.
I understand, yes, of course. No, that makes a lot of sense. And even Leon Mendonça, who I'm in contact with quite often, he mentioned a very similar thing, that he's just checking the games of, for example, Kasparov, as you mentioned it, and he's trying to analyze them on his own, and he sees this was a good move, that made the difference. But why did that make the difference? And this is on you to work on and get the feeling for it. The question is, can we see an example?
Yes, we can see many examples.
Let us check out one first.
Look, yes. This is an example from the match Fischer-Spassky, Spassky-Fischer from 72, the match of the century. And just showing some quick examples in this position, which was played, it's a theoretical position, was at the time quite popular. Spassky made a novelty f4 based on some tactical tricks. If black takes, which looks logical, and plays g5, this works out for white very, very well, and white is getting with advantage here. But Fischer reacted with a move knight g6, which looks very weird because it breaks the pawn structure. The knight takes g6, f takes g6, and Spassky took on e5, which is actually a mistake. But we are talking about this pawn structure. This pawn structure is good for black. This was shown in this game, and it is good to know that it's good for black, and why I also explain in the video. But why is f takes e5 here bad? Why this move is a positional mistake? Because now we look at this position and compare with this position. Yeah? What white got? He opens f file, but black also has an open f file. Pawn on e5 you can say is weak, but it doesn't matter at all because white cannot attack, or black can very easily protect it. And the d pawn is a passed pawn, but it goes nowhere. Black easily can blockade it. So in fact, black got here an extra square d6 for his pieces. White got nothing. And this makes a huge difference. Also here, white has a possibility to play f5 at some moment. After castling, for instance, it's just a possibility. Yeah, white can choose here when to play or not to play f5. So f takes e5 is a positional mistake, and this pawn structure is good for black. Now, if we make a few more moves, white played here a4, which is another strategical mistake, and black played a5. And again, it's very good to know that this pawn on b6, it looks like a backward pawn weakness. It doesn't play a big role because black protects it. The pawn on a4 now is also a weakness. So you can say that white also protects it easily. Put the bishop on c2. Black will play with the bishop on d7. But now, if we watch this bishop from c2, it has only the idea to protect the pawn on a4 and to protect the pawn on e4, while this bishop from d7, it works on both wings. And black can later, this is what he did in the game. Queen g6 comes here. The bishop is always working in two directions. And it just, this became standard. When white plays a4 in such positions, it very often the direction is a5. You don't have to think too much. You know that pawn on b6 is not a big weakness. And so these kind of things you can learn from classical games.
I see.
And in my product, I explain these things in the video about the game.
That is very interesting indeed. Now, what is your recommendation if you look, I mean, you're explaining in the video in detail, in depth, all the things that are part of this. You can also take a look at the games, of course, but what is your recommendation on how to get the most out of this chess-based training course?
Well, you have to try to understand really what is going on the board. So first I would say that read my introduction about the game, because I explain, this is for instance the 5th game of the match. It's good to know a little bit what was the score at this moment, what was trying white to do to achieve in this, what was Fischer trying with the black pieces to achieve, how aggressive was white, how aggressive was black. So we need some background, at least some background information to know about this game. Secondly, watch the video. Watch the video and try to understand there. And then you can replay the moves, and you can always try to understand, okay, did I ever play, did I ever had this choice in my games? So to know the critical moments. Here I show just few moments in this game. And this was the 5th game of the match, and Spassky was leading, and in this game he lost with the white pieces very quickly. Actually, he made a tactical mistake, and it was a turning point of the match. Now the 6th game after that was another classical game, which teaches you a lot of things about some different pawn structure. I can show you quickly, maybe.
Okay, yeah, sure, please. And this is another Fischer-Spassky example.
From the same match, the next game, which here Fischer played.
Number 6, okay.
Yes, knight d4, because the pawn is pinned.
Sure.
And then he takes on e6, plays e4. And this is a standard way to play against the hanging pawns. And now almost anything what black would do has strategical drawbacks. If, like in the game, you play d4, which looks nice, in fact, it's even a big strategical mistake. It was better to play c4 maybe in these positions to limit, because now white gets square c4 for the bishop and plays f4, plays e5, and all the light squares are weakened. But this idea in itself to change the pawn structure here and to play e4, it happens it became standard. If we look just to show some ideas, here we have a reverse colors. Black takes on e3, plays e5, and suddenly it's exactly the same idea.
I know this one.
And, yeah, and white must play very carefully here to keep the balance. A very recent example, actually, from one of my students. Let's put it this.
Just a couple of.
Just yes, it was a Blitz game. Usually, I don't show Blitz games, but okay, I was national trainers and I was watching the game. And black makes the same idea and plays e5 here. And again, the position is objectively very close to equal. But white has these two weak pawns in the end. If he will play d5, this pawn will be. If he plays d5. D5, then the pawn on c4 will remain very weak. If he does nothing like in the game, then black takes on d4 and attacks the pawns. And I think in the game white played d5 in some moment. And but this idea in itself is good to know, such ideas.
I see.
And there are many examples, of course, in modern praxis when it works.
So what you're saying is that some of the players, they are kind of inventors of a certain move, which is now almost a standard or used quite often, because back then it was like very novel, and you're emphasizing on them to point those things out.
Yes, and okay, sometimes it might have happened before, but on the highest level, when everybody sees it and against a strong opponent, and when it works out, then it has a completely different impact on a chess public. And so this is, I present 33 games where you can learn a lot of them and out of them, but also there are just some games which are very nice and which is very, very good to know.
I have to ask you one last question. In those games, are you concentrating on nothing else than chess, and the moves and the games, or are you also talking about the players a tiny bit, their history, what they are, and stuff like that?
I talk about this in the video, in most of the videos, and also when I made the final product, I have an introductory text and I write there. Look, just also one example from
1956.
Exactly, 1956. But you know how old was Fischer then? He was 13 years old. He was like very young, and his opponent, Donald Byrne, has been a US champion, and Fischer is black, and white made just one mistake here in the opening, and he was severely punished. In this position, black is actually winning. It looks like absolutely normal position, nothing, but and it's amazing to see how Fischer punished his opponent, just being 13 years old. It's something which you it's impossible to guess if you don't. But it's just a very nice tactical shot, which I can show you if you want.
Yes, please.
Yes, he played here as a move, knight a4, which is like completely unexpected. It's like, what is this? And all variations here work out for black, but actually the game was absolutely nice after that. It's almost...
Wow.
It's yes, if you take on a4, I take on e4, and again with ideas like queen a5 check, everything works out for black. Bishop takes f3, knight takes g5, and so. But just knowing such ideas, and also here I tell a bit about the tournament. The tournament was a close tournament in 1956, was won by Reshevsky, and Fischer, I think he finished on the 9th place or something. He was still very young and was not that strong, but he had this brilliancy already, finding such. But not only this move. If you watch the games, there were several completely unexpected moves, which are very objectively correct. It's very nice just to know such games and to know how Fischer developed.
So besides of all the knowledge about the little bit of history, about the novelties, and about all the games of some of the greatest players of all time, this chess-based training course is also to just enjoy as well and to look at some beautiful games.
Yes, yeah, okay, maybe this is in the first place to enjoy and to look at the beautiful game. I actually made also a chapter about Petrosian's exchange sacrifice, positional exchange sacrifice, where I take many examples from Petrosian's practice.
Okay.
And I also explain there why Petrosian is so, because there are many people who are doing this. But it was Petrosian who is attributed as the biggest developer of this idea of positional exchange sacrifice. And it's very interesting to find out why he was so successful with this and how he considered a sacrifice actually not a sacrifice but an exchange of pieces, and why and in what situations and so on.
Well, great. Thank you so much for taking your time to explain a little bit about your chess-based training course. And you at home, you know what to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.